We're going to move on to the next portion of our webinar today, where we're going to hear from Wai Jia Tam, who's the founder and CEO of Kite Global. She's also the deputy lead of Global Health and Community Service at the National University of Singapore. Singapore's recent outbreaks of COVID-19, where more than 53,000 diagnoses were made and a total of over 300,000 migrant workers, proved tremendously challenging in the area of risk communication and community engagement. Let's join Wai Jia as she shares a glimpse of an innovative multimodal approach to community engagement during the migrant worker outbreak in Singapore. Harnessing the power of art and storytelling, she illustrates how a creative and participatory approach can catalyze agency, fuel resilience, and inspire positive change in empowered communities. So Wai Jia, thank you and welcome.
All right, so hello everyone, my name is Wai Jia, and today I will be sharing a creative approach to RCCE in an outbreak, just as Mindy had introduced. So just to start off, I'm just gonna prepare all of you that today's sharing is gonna be a little personal as well, but bear with me because I will bring this to a landing point. Now the question, whenever someone starts a presentation, we always tell other people about who we are. But today I think the question, I'd like to reverse it to become, who am I? And what is my place in this outbreak? I'm sure many of you have been intensely involved in the COVID-19 outbreak. And the question I'd like for all of us to consider as I continue with the slides are, who am I? And what is my place in this outbreak? And how did I get here? Now, well, who I am for a start, I started to coordinate the RCC efforts in Singapore and leading student engagement efforts in the outbreak, but I did not start off here. At the beginning, I was a medical educator and I tried as far as possible not to get involved in the outbreak because although I graduated as a medical doctor, I had been out of clinical practice for 7 years. However, while I was teaching my students in an elective I had called Health and Humanity to help to rekindle the art of humanity back into medicine, I started conducting these participatory kite song workshops with them. And as they started to rediscover their dreams in themselves, I had the revolutionary experience of this rediscovering the dreams that I had buried myself. So, there was an external crisis of 53,000 migrant workers in Singapore being infected with COVID-19. However, inside of me, there was also an internal crisis. And what led to the participatory success of the RCCE efforts, I think, was the connection between the crisis I had in me and the crisis that was going out of me. So Singapore was known at first for keeping keeping the outbreak very well contained. However, by April, it was very evident that things were going out of hand. And so there was a turning point, not only in the society, in the government policy making level, but I think many healthcare workers experienced a turning point. Because for one, everybody knew in their hearts that while our country relied heavily on foreign workers and migrant workers to construct and to clean and to maintain this beautiful, immaculate country that runs on efficiency, we suddenly realized that the invisible people behind these walls were not so invisible anymore. And so came the decision where everybody had to make, do we want to be involved or not? And for myself, having a husband who had a liver transplant before and who was immunocompromised, I took a long time to decide whether I wanted to go back to the front lines when they started calling doctors back to the front lines to help. But what happened was a decision that I made internally, because deep down inside, there was a dream. And so there in me, all the nurses were laughing at me that after 7 years of not being in clinical practice, my first foray back into clinical work was in full-blown PPE. So I started off like everybody else, doing swabs for migrant workers, but it soon became apparent that as we swabbed patient after patient, person after person, that there was a huge sense of bewilderment in the community. Now there were migrant workers from different countries, from Bangladesh, from India, from Thailand, all over the world, and yet there was very little that was communicated with them at the start, especially when the outbreak was acute and fresh at the beginning, and there was, as what all of you may know, a sense of chaos. But I remember what happened was my mentor, who was overseeing several of the community isolation facilities, Professor Malcolm, he texted me one morning and said, "Wai Jia, you're good at drawing, aren't you? Can you do me a health booklet for all the migrant workers coming in?" And at that time, when he gave me this request, I kind of scoffed at it. I thought to myself, I'm a public health person. Why is my mentor asking me to draw stuff for migrant workers? And I soon realized how important this work was. And I put my heart and effort into it. And very soon, the students that you had seen in the earlier slide, they became a powerful, powerful force behind this movement, which I'll show you in a little while. And so what started off as just an idea became articulated to me by Professor Dale Fisher, who soon became a mentor after he had seen those cartoons. I had to really clarify myself that when he first heard about me and saw the booklets, he said, "Are you the cartoonist?" And I said, "Yes, I am, but I would love to know more about how all this fits into the big picture." And he very quickly showed me the pillars of an outbreak response and the importance of RCCE, and that's how I got involved. So what we've developed over the months has become a full-blown multimodal toolkit, which I would love to share with you today. It started off with just booklets, but very soon it became posters and different types of engagement. So these are the booklets that you saw. My terrible scrolls had become little cartoons that had been run past migrant workers. We did KP surveys to find out what they really believed, what they wanted to know. We ran past some of the cartoons through groups with different ethnicities to see if they would be offended and what was culturally sensitive, health literate and what was health literate to them. So my students did the amazing job of having them translated into 8 different languages. And so in the early part of the outbreak, really the health institute, although I do work in a health institution, but because things were moving so fast and there were different levels of bureaucracy, I relied on the very organic structure of my own non-profit, and with the volunteers there who were from different fields of work, not just medical, but from graphic design, from art, and they put all this together to become a series of health booklets for 3 different types of migrant workers. 1, those who were housed in general dormitories. 2, those who were in swab isolation facilities, those who had just been swabbed and did not know whether their tests were positive or negative. And last but not least, it was for migrant workers who were tested positive already. So each of them had slightly different concerns. And then the booklets became posters, because we thought, while migrant workers are waiting in line, what better way to, put up visual posters that, speak to them, not only through the booklets, but also on the walls, stairwells, near the ATM machines, etc. And very soon, of course, we realized that digital engagement was just as important. So we put together these booklets as well as posters on the website. This is the general website, but when you go into it, it's language specific. So we really wanted to tailor it to migrant workers. And of course, throughout the way, we did our best to get feedback from migrant workers to hear what they thought. So when you click on one of the men in whatever language it is, it goes to a language specific page where you can find all the different resources that you need. And then we also had to start partnering different kinds of stakeholders from different levels to disseminate this through soft copy. Now this then became a little bit more exciting, because I started to realize that what really, really moved people and what really helped to amplify these efforts was a personal face. And so I remember going to one of the dormitories and sharing with them, what's a Chinese girl like me doing in like a migrant worker dormitory where these are men which I don't speak. And yet during that time when I shared with them some of this information, they shared with me that some of their friends, they told me, they said, ma'am, my brothers, they are so scared of coming down to the medical post out of their rooms, because they think that if they're positive, bad things will happen after that. And we don't know what's going to happen. And so what we did in response to that was we got a migrant worker himself who was isolated in a community isolation facility. So he has been tested positive. And if you can read the subtitles here, he was telling his brothers about the amazing experience that he had while staying in the community isolation facility. And this video, of course, was shared among the brothers and received good feedback. So of course, then you had the other challenge of having the medical post now filled with people, which was a happy problem to have at that time, rather than having nobody show up in the medical post. So you see how these different interactions come together, and the two-way feedback is really, really important. So these face-to-face engagements were something that I really did my best to advocate for, only because in our time and age of technology, it is so easy just to rest on the fact that digital engagement is so much easier, it's cost-effective, it's easy. But the fact is, many of our migrant workers come from societies that are extremely communal, and this face-to-face contact is so important. So some of the concerns that they had shared with me was only shared through these face-to-face engagements, however short they were. If they could be planned, especially with a translator or with a doctor from their native country who spoke their native tongue, was so, so powerful. And so I called this campaign, just casually at the start, called Socially Distanced, Humanly Connected, because I really wanted to drive home the point that while we may be socially distanced, there is so much that we can offer when our own personal stories and our personal humanity meet and collide in the same place. So these were some activities that were created. You see, I don't speak much of their language, but using these posters that I'd done, front, in Tamil and back in Bengali, we would ask the workers to guess what was on the picture while showing them the words in the wrong language. And then after they guessed, we would flip it over and show them the right language and get the migrant worker himself, as you see here, explaining what the poster was to his friends. So it's a sense of empowerment, a sense of autonomy, and of course, a sense of agency that we want to give them, because ultimately, while we can do all the risk communication that we want, the message that they share with one another is most powerful when it comes from them. So these face-to-face engagements were amplified when we started doing reproducible training curricula. So on the left, you see my other colleagues conducting this at different sites. On the right is empowering migrant workers, kind of a training video that we started to circulate. Now this is one of my favorite things, and we're going to have a taste, a little teaser of what this is all about, because you've heard me talk about Kite Song, and the NGO is called Kite Song. But what happened at the community isolation facility was really eye-opening to me, because what you see here are Bangladeshi migrant workers on the floor, and all of them are putting their hearts into expressing their thoughts and aspirations and dreams during the COVID-19 outbreak. And what you see over here on the right side, where a migrant worker is holding the microphone, is after watching the Kite Song video, he was giving his brothers a rousing speech about what he had learned and how we all needed to overcome this time of adversity. This is an example of one of the kites that a migrant worker showed me, and this picture is the most poignant picture that, if I could just keep one picture of what COVID-19, this outbreak, meant to me, it would be this. Because he showed this to me and said, the little green tree that you see on the top is not a tree at all, but his daughter. And his daughter was the same age as my daughter. And he said, I drew my daughter for my dream kite because she'll be a year old this month. And my dream is that she'll be a doctor, because all the doctors I've met here have been so wonderful to me. They always help us. So I want her to help others too. Thank you for everything. And through these messages and pictures that they're so powerfully penned down, we received glimpses of what they were thinking and feeling. And as they put up their kites on the walls of their isolation facility, it was a message of empowerment and a message of mutual encouragement. And this picture is particularly poignant to me because a kite, which is a powerful symbol of freedom, was made by this worker with a kite string made with barricade tape, a symbol of quarantine. So these are some of the subsequent workshops that we conducted, and of course migrant workers are holding up their kites, and at the end we give them a health ambassador badge, which you can see as a round white thing on their chest, and we tell them that, you know, when you leave these isolation facilities back to your dormitories, you are a health ambassador and you have the power to make a difference to your communities. And so with that, my medical students came on board and they asked me, you know, how else could they help, because they were not allowed to, you know, participate firsthand in the outbreak at those isolation facilities. And I said, there's so much to do in terms of digital engagement. So we came up with My Brother SG, and it started off first as, you know, a means to get out some health messaging, maybe comics or whatever. But these comics then grew into something different, because the comics gave us a platform, not just to, you know, share fun pictures or messages, but rather give us a channel to really talk to the migrant workers, find out what their concerns were, how they express themselves. And we realized very quickly that visual pictures meant and spoke so much to their communities. And so these were different kinds of health messaging. Some were inspirational, as you saw before, and some were, you know, had important messages, especially to convey to them at key times, especially when they were returning back to work. For example, this one, stay vigilant. Now, this one is one of my favorite slides. Now, on this poster that you see on the left-hand side, the green poster, it was created not by me or my team or my NGO, but rather by the migrant workers themselves. And on the right side, where you see me and all the little pictures over there, is our very first webinar called Keep Hope Alive. And it was co-hosted by myself, a Bengali doctor, and a Bengali-speaking doctor, and also 3 other Bangladeshi workers. And in fact, in this particular webinar, they were the ones who taught me how to use StreamYard. So they had set the whole thing up, we had discussed what the title would be, and our thoughts were, or rather their idea was to have, you know, regular sessions where we could invite expert panelists, such as this, you know, like when we have a webinar like this all over the world. They wanted to do it for their own communities. And so, well, I didn't want to invite, like, you know, a superstar on the first one without knowing, you know, how it would turn out. So I did the experiment on myself. And well, it turned out interestingly, because I wondered, what would I actually talk about? Would they actually be interested in health messages? And, you know, could I really pull this thing off with them? And the amazing thing was, all I shared was the story of kite song. And I'm getting to that. I just want you to hold your thought over there, because as we share, you know, these different fancy campaigns and all that, I realized the important thing was that personal connection with the migrant workers and that sense of trust that needed to be built before powerful health messaging could be worked around. So this poster is actually for this Sunday, and you see over here, it's the Chinese doctor on the circle. He's Dr. Goh Wei Leong, and he is a very prominent Singaporean who founded one of the leading, you know, migrant worker NGOs, and now he has stepped down. But the migrant workers were dying to have him on their webinar. So, you know, before when we first started, we were surprised that 14,000 migrant workers were listening in and were watching the video. And it soon grew to 23,000 when we had Professor Dale Fisher on board, and then 30,000 when we had another Bengali doctor on board. So these are some of the other initiatives and mental health booklets that were done in response to the mental health crisis that was happening because of the extended isolation. So again, it's RCC efforts evolving and responding to this kind of two-way communication of what's happening on the ground. And of course, it gave us the opportunity to partner widely. So there was, during the early parts of the outbreak, nobody was doing any coordination of all the RCC efforts. And through friendship, through relationships, I think this was how all the different efforts from the different stakeholders were galvanized. And it was through a very interesting platform. It was actually through the comics. So through that, we are actually now galvanizing a local steering committee so as to strategize the way forward. But it was interesting because when I look back, it was the comics, something very harmless, something that, you know, didn't need to go through bureaucratic kind of corporate communications structural approval, that won and galvanized a national community together. So the long-term strategy really is to create a team of people that can respond to relevant ministries above, but also to ground needs. And that is the important part, and that's what we hope to do moving forward more and more. So as I shared this before, Keep Hope Alive was the webinar we had done. And this is the part where I hope all of us would just open our hearts and minds, because we're going to do something a little creative here for the next segment. I don't have a lot of time, but I hope it will work, and I hope that you will be blessed. Now, when I first started out this Keep Hope Alive webinar program with the migrant workers, I thought to myself, maybe I'll just do what we did at the community isolation workshops. We'll just play the video and hope that it pans out. But very quickly, just a few minutes into the conversation with the migrant workers on Facebook Live, I soon realized that there was such a common bond of humanity, and I felt led to share with them why Kite Song. So they interviewed me as CEO of Kite Song, and so I shared with them that when I was 18, Kite Song began when I lived with these girls who had been abused and abandoned, and while I was there, these girls had to be evicted out of their home. And I soon learned that this happened year after year after year because of the rising land costs. And these girls had topped their classes and topped their schools, and they had this boundless, immeasurable joy, which I could not describe and put my finger on. And when I left Nepal, I left with such a heartache, because I thought to myself, surely there was more that we could do. And I thought to myself, perhaps painting a picture book might be able to raise funds for a permanent home for them. And with that silly, silly idea, I shared this with the migrant workers, with that silly, silly idea in a time of faithlessness, birthed the book Kite Song, because just one person believed in the idea. And within 3 months, more than $100,000 was raised to build this permanent home for the girls. And now these girls are grown. They have, they've grown up into young women. Many of them are teachers. One is a nurse. And you can see in this picture, they are they are almost the same girls in nearly the same positions, except that this is 10 years apart, approximately 10 years apart. And so as I showed this and I shared this with the migrant workers, I shared that, it doesn't matter how small or how big your dream is. It matters that you believe in it. And when I shared that, just as a session to trial, to pilot, I just thought, we're just winging it. Suddenly a connection was made. And I realized that this partnership with the Bengali workers who had asked me to come on Facebook Live with them, this risk that we took, was a partnership with 60,000 migrant workers following this page. And with that, birthed a channel of trust, because there was vulnerability and there was humanity. And with that, birthed a movement. And so I began my presentation today asking all of us, who am I and what was I created for in this outbreak? And I asked the question, it might seem really, what has that got to do with participatory approaches, But it revealed to me that if we can be honest with ourselves, and if we can discover that dream that was inside of us that exposes a sense of openness and humanity, then that link of vulnerability opens the way ahead for trust to be built. And that is measureless. So it gave birth to a movement that was participatory, that was inclusive, but it was also empowering, because a sense of connection was made. And because of that, there was friendship. And so the migrant workers requested for more and more and more. And so we started to do sessions on chronic disease to answer their questions, or on mental health awareness, etc. And we always tried to engage them to make sure that it was a two-way thing. So the movement was socially distanced but humanly connected. And right now I'm just going to show you a short glimpse of the Kite Song video, which we had translated into the migrant workers' languages.
I like kites. I like to fly kites because they make me feel So free. So free. There is a kite song within me that will not be still. Higher and higher my kite goes, but how unpredictable the winds can be. Kites, like dreams, slip away so easily. Run, run for your dreams. Keep running. Don't stop. It's never easy to realize your dreams. Sometimes it feels like everyone is laughing at you. And nobody believes in you.
So I hope you enjoyed that little segment. So you get the sense that it's poignant and it's visual and it's metaphorical, and this resonated deeply with the migrant workers. And from there, that's how they shared the experiences that you saw before. So the key really is that there's no dream too small, and that was the message that they left with. So right now, although we don't have much time left, but we'll do a little experiment, just a little glimpse of how the workshop runs. But with sharing this, right now we're doing training videos as well. We asked migrant workers some key questions, and right now I just want you to pick one question that stands out most to you. And in a short while, in just maybe 2 minutes, I'd like to ask some of you to, if you're comfortable, to share how this has impacted you. So you can type it in the group chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and share. But please go ahead and share, was there a page of the story that resonated with you the most? Or, what was your kite song moment in global health or in the pandemic? And, would you draw or write your dream on a kite? If you have a piece of paper and a pencil, if something in the visuals really stood out to you, would you just take a moment just to pen it down and write it down? And I'm just going to give everyone just 2 minutes, 1.5 to 2 minutes, just to ponder over this. And please, you don't have to be artistic. Yeah. Just going to let it go for another minute.
Yeah. While people are working on their answer to Wajiad's questions here, if you have an actual question for her, please just go ahead and put it in the Q&A area on your screen. Okay? And then we'll ask a couple people to share their feedback on these questions in just a minute.
Okay, I think I want to make sure we end on time. Is there anyone who would like to share something they learned, and I'm going to just tie this in with any comments and thoughts that you might have. I saw so many wonderful comments on the chat group. Thank you so much. Actually, while some of you are plucking up the courage too, I'll show you this picture that a migrant worker shared with me. You can see here me and my family, and the kite is my dream. And COVID-19 was like the storm or like the scissors storm of uncertainty and cut off the kite string. But now, he said he had tied it back. He said, Singapore government is with me, I can achieve my dream. So this was his, his takeaway, and this was up on the wall, if you can see it. He had stuck it up on the wall. Yeah. Does anybody want to share? Maybe one or two people?
Thanks, Wai Jia. I think we have somebody's hand up. Martha, would you like to share?
Hi, everyone. I would just say, I think a kite song moment in the pandemic for me. Actually, I have to say, I know my experience of the pandemic maybe was very different than for so many people, but there was actually so much about it that's been positive for me, because as a public health person and working on risk communication, community engagement, at the beginning of the pandemic, I just really wasn't sure how I might contribute or where or what I might really be able to do. But I ended up working for such an amazing team, with the team at WHO in Europe and also with headquarters, that it actually really did feel like being lifted up with the kite, and just the amount of working together and what I feel like we were able to do. So that was really positive for me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, Martha. That's beautiful. As I learned, friends that you make in a pandemic are friends you make for life. Wonderful. Should we hear one more? And then I will just round up.
Thanks, Martha. Do others want to share? I see Gerard here.
Melinda, I can definitely share my thoughts if it's okay.
Great, thank you.
Shall I go ahead?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. Wai Jia, this was a brilliant presentation, and I loved the way you presented and also all of the concepts that you talked about. And that's what I want to respond to mainly. I love the use of the word kite as a metaphor for all of the concepts that you touched upon. It was a really touching metaphor for the idea of dreams, which for me also implies discovery, self-discovery, connection, the emotional vulnerability that you talked about, which is the pathway to making authentic human connection, which in turn is then the pathway to really getting together, listening, finding solutions, moving ahead, communicating, all of that. It was very, very good. And you can see the integrity of your approach, of who you are, with how you presented it. So I think that is also communicated really beautifully across to us, certainly to me, that it's a very, very genuine presentation that you made. And it's as much about you and who you are as much as it is about your work and the concepts that you presented. I think there's a lot to learn from all of this in terms of our work with communities out there, whether in emergencies or even otherwise. I think it's got the essence of what it takes to work with human beings, on whatever be the context. So that's what I really loved about your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks,
Rod.
Rod.
So much for sharing.
I think we have one more who would like to share their experience. Lelia?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you for the lovely presentation. I think for me, one of my dreams has always been to find a way to balance out doing this public health work that involves a lot of travel and going to interesting places, but also with being rooted, with being able to spend time with my friends and family. Yeah. And I remember the moment when I was living in Rwanda at the beginning of the year and seeing this rolling in of different travel restrictions and realizing that I was going to have to make a choice between staying away from home or coming close. And I think the amazing opportunity of this pandemic for me has been going from being far away for a year to actually spending a lot of quality time with some people I love very much.
Wow.
So yeah, I think that's it for me, but thank you so much for this presentation.
Leila, that is beautiful because you just brought out an important theme, which is loneliness in times of isolation. And I think that would be such a powerful and beautiful personal story to share, even with migrant workers, because many of them feel like, the outside world don't understand their pain. So thank you so much for sharing that so vulnerably with us. Thank you. So with that, Mindy, can I bring it to a close? Would that be all right? Okay. So I think the way forward really is, through this season where I think things have been coming down and a little bit. We're trying to consolidate all that we've learned as a reflection, to evaluate what has happened, and moving forward to package all this as part of a consolidated toolkit so that we can and share this with the region. So what you saw here as a toolkit. We're hoping to put it together with instructional videos and training videos so that this may be shared or replicated in other places as well. So with that, this is my contact number, my email. You're welcome to write to me if you have further questions after the presentation. And of course, none of this could have been possible without all these wonderful people who are behind all these efforts. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you. Thank you, Mindy. Thank you, Nina.